You know, this is a personal thing with me, but I know others feel the same way. D&D combat takes just a little too long, and I've been trying for years to speed up my combat. Just slightly, without changing the rules and mechanics too much. Because, and I can't stress this enough, I love D&D combat. I do, it can just take a little too long, especially if you have more than 5 players. To me, combat should be quick and snappy. Pow, pow, pow. So let's talk about some things I do and some things DMs do in actual plays to keep really good pacing in their combat. First up is an easy one, and it's something I find myself doing more and more as the years go on, and it's just taking average monster damage. Monsters in D&D have dice that you can roll to decide how much damage they do. Then they also have an average number that you can just take without rolling. Most of the time I just take that average, and it speeds up my games exponentially. Sometimes I give players the choice whether I roll or take the average. And for the big bad guys, I usually roll, but for every other combat, just taking the average damage means I can just roll to hit, and then that's it. And let me just jump in real quick to talk about the sponsor of this video, Nimble 5e, a new TTRPG built off of D&D 5e that streamlines and eliminates the slog using the best parts of other TTRPGs. It focuses on fast, tactical combat and giving more meaningful choices to both the players and the GM. Examples of quicker combat and streamlined gameplay with Nimble are things like not rolling to hit, you just roll your damage dice, missing on a 1 and critting on the max result, or reworked initiative that gets players instantly into combat. Nimble is on backer kit right now, the link is in the description, so go check it out. Okay, my second point is a relatively obvious one, but for fast combat, the DM needs to take their turns as quickly as possible. And I know, the DM is doing so much, and maybe taking multiple goes at once with different creatures, but by just being decisive and making a move fast, even if it may not be the smartest or most tactical move, it increases momentum. And often in D&D, the players follow the DM's lead. So if the DM's turns are really quick, you'll find the players' turns will get quicker and quicker, since the DM is setting the pace. Any DM you watch online, Matthew Mercer, Brennan Mulligan, Abria Iyengar, Deborah Ann Wall, they all have one thing in common, and that is that they are quick on their turns. Speaking of Brennan Mulligan, he does something amazing during combat to speed everything up, and that is, through his villains, he goads the player's characters. He will often have his enemies shout out insults or annoying things that make the players just want to kill them as much as possible. And this works, by the way. If you have a player who is trying to figure out the most optimal move possible, and you know they're counting squares or scanning their character sheet to figure out what to do next, if you have an enemy just shout out an insult at them, 90% of the time that player will just decide to attack the person insulting them, just with like the first thing on their actions list. And they'll feel good about it too. And often this kind of goading leads to rivalries that mean every round that player will just attack the same enemy as quickly as possible because they hate them. It can also lead to fun role playing and a more memorable fight. I highly recommend. Like, have your villains bully your player characters. Brian Murphy has like really quick, funny, laid back combat that he can end up making quite complex because his players don't get bogged down in unnecessary details. And he does this by simply using theatre of the mind. Now, I myself am a minis and terrain guy. I really like pulling out a battle map and having a visual aid to battles. But more and more lately, I've been throwing in the odd theatre of the mind combat, and wow, does it speed up everything. Players can get bogged down in decision making when they have a battle mat in front of them. They can get analysis paralysis since they have unlimited options of movement and actions in a 3D space. But Theatre of the Mind strips down a lot of these options, leaving the decision of who in range do I attack and what do I attack them with. That's all I have to think about. Players make much faster decisions, and you as a DM also just end up making battles more simple because it's easier to track for you. So I recommend, if it's a combat that is not that important, or if it's just 1 or 2 enemies, do Theatre of the Mind. It is less tactical for players, but you will also get through it much faster. So, next up, I was watching Brennan Mulligan DM for the second episode of The Sleeping City, and something stood out to me in this battle. The battle map has really cool terrain on it, but actually, not that much terrain. It is relatively open, and in fact later in the battle something happens, and it opens up the terrain even more. And I realised the temptation is, if you have terrain, or enjoy building it, to put it everywhere. You know, to really impress your players. It looks really cool, it gives people more options for like cover, or makes them feel like they need to use the space more tactically. You know, they can stand on trees or rocks and get better line of sight of what's going on. It's like, it is really cool and fun, don't get me wrong, but it does lead to more of that analysis paralysis I was talking about. More hiding and slipping behind cover and movement-based hijinks. Having less terrain, having less areas for the characters to hide behind will lead to faster combat. And on that same note, combat in smaller, confined spaces, like a small room or cave, also leads to fast-paced games, because everyone's stuck in this small space. All they can do is attack each other. Speaking of being stuck in a small room with each other, if you feel like being trapped in this room with me for hours on end, check out my Twitch, because that's probably what it kind of feels like. If you want to chat or even argue with me about some of the points I made in this video, it's the best place to do it. And I love the discourse. I'm probably streaming live on Twitch right now. Link in the description. Also subscribe to this YouTube channel if you want to see more content like this. Subscriptions help me grow so much. And next, a big secret for faster combat is to let the players know more information. Let them know a creature's AC. Let them know the initiative order. Maybe not at the very start of combat, but after a round or two, they could probably figure it out anyway. And the more information they have, the quicker they will make decisions. And speaking of quick decisions, there is a huge thing every DM can do to drastically increase how fast combat is. And it's simply to ask your players at the start of combat to make big, fast decisions. A lot of players don't realize how long they're actually taking during their go, or they don't realize the knock-on effects it can have, slowing everything down. And especially new players, they think they have to make the best tactical and optimal decision during combat, otherwise they're letting everyone at the table down. So they really take their time with their decisions. But in reality, making quick decisions can lead to funnier, more memorable moments, and also the players' characters would not have enough time in the moment to come up with these amazing strategies or figure out the best spell to use. Anyway, they have like 6 seconds in game time. So just by asking your players to be decisive and move as quickly as possible in combat will propel things forwards much faster. You can also ask them to constantly be thinking about their next go while it's other people's goes. So when it gets to them, they can move faster too. Speaking of thinking about what they need to do before their go starts, Matt Mercer has a great habit that I've spoken about before, but it is worth repeating, and that is letting players know when their turn is coming up. Let them know they are on deck. And finally, something I've found that I have not heard many people talk about: play fast-paced combat music during combat. It may sound obvious, but the faster the pace of the music, the faster the pace of the decision making, both for players and DM. There's just something about it. Good combat music gets the table excited. It gets the heartbeat up, and it does tend to increase the pace of just everything. And now, I should also say, all these tips are for faster combat. Maybe not specifically better combat for your table. So if your players like a lot of terrain, or like long battles with a lot of strategic decision making and tactical plays, or they like not having a ton of information about enemies' AC or the initiative order, then maybe speeding up combat shouldn't be the goal for your table. But you can pick and choose things I've spoken about in this video, and hopefully you can customize it to your own games to find a balance that works best. Every DM is different, every table is different, and there's no one size that fits all. That's it, that's the end of the video. Thank you for watching.